Welcome to Think Smart with TMFG. I'm Mike Connon. I'm here with John Iaconetti, Senior Financial Advisor with the McClelland Financial Group of Assante Capital Management. And today we're going to talk about inheritance and how to, I guess inheritance is something that's inevitably happens to a lot of people. And we want to talk about how to prepare your kids. This is a question we have from a lot of our clients is, I want to leave money to my kids, but I want to make sure they know how to handle it.
Yeah, and especially now, this day and age of a lot of gifting, a lot of kids are having difficulty maybe getting into the housing market. So maybe not even just waiting to the inheritance, but being able to gift it while they're still young, working, and living.
I get probably a phone call a week about that.
Yeah.
And particularly with how houses are. I mean, the prices have come down a little bit lately, but it's still unaffordable for a young person to get into a house without some help.
Absolutely.
I guess when we look at it too, we go back, Warren Buffett, who's one of my favorite people ever. Warren Buffett always had a quote that said, give your kids enough money so they can accomplish anything, but not so much as they can do nothing, which I always thought was a great quote. And, when you look at people like Warren Buffett, they gave their kids decent amounts of money, but he made sure the majority went to charities and things like that because he didn't want to spoil them. We've seen this case many times.
Oh yeah, there's a big time curse when it comes to like over comfort for a lot of younger kids, maybe that have their parents, being able to provide them funds, and really what that does is it kind of dulls down their drive to pursue their own wealth and do it on their own. And
I think we've talked about it before in podcasts, but it's the third generation curse. Money has trouble making it through 3 generations. There's the first person who is, I would say, almost the bulldog who goes out and the entrepreneurs, and they just work and work and work and make a fortune, and their kids get so used to seeing that, they go through and that next generation is still a hard worker because that's all their parents valued. And over time, I think that parent, when he becomes a parent or she becomes a parent, the problem is they notice all the negative effects that they had on losing their lifestyle, losing all that, and they begin to soften a bit, which is probably good in a way, but the next generation gets raised a lot softer, and a lot of times they get soft can move to spoiled very quickly.
Yeah, and it becomes, you're inheriting the wealth at that point, but you, in that third generation, you lose the habits that, maybe the grandparent may have had in order to build that wealth. And that's where, first step of kind of training your kids onto money is having them inherit the habits first before any of the wealth follows.
And habits are much more important.
Of course.
At the end of the day. Many years ago, I went into a family office and I met with these people, and they ran a family office for billionaire families. And it was in the U.S. because there's more billionaires down there. There's not many in Canada. But they talked about all the rules they set up, and they'd have meetings with the families. And the meetings with the families, it's funny, we do family meetings here, and a bit of it was taken from seeing how these family offices worked. And they had some rules, which was, the first thing was no spouses in the meetings, so they'd have the direct family because that's what they want to be able to have open, honest conversations about everything in there. And they had their rules on what people could buy. And even the billionaires in the world have rules to not lose their billions of dollars. And I remember the big thing was boats and airplanes. Airplanes well, what happens is people buy things and they think of the expense of buying it. They don't think of the maintenance cost.
The maintenance,
And, all of a sudden you have a boat, it's going to cost, you need a crew on the boat, which is a constant cost, and they get expensive. So they really got rid of the yachts and the private airlines and all things like that for the extremely wealthy, and helps them do better as a family.
Yeah, it's maybe not problems a lot of people would have now, but it really does resonate with our clients now and the difficulties that they're having with their kids. So, Mike, what would you suggest, I guess, to kind of get kids to kind of inherit those habits? Like, what should they be doing?
I guess the earlier start, the better. What was your first job?
My first job, I was a baseball umpire, and I was about 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The lessons you got?
Parents are angry. They love competition. But no, it did teach me to make a living for myself. I grew up playing baseball, but I started to find a love for actually, providing a service and earning an income. And it's a good thing to start at a young age.
It teaches you. It was funny. My first job was a paper boy, and as you know, I grew up in sort of the ghetto in New Jersey. And the interesting thing that my mother made me do was you had to go, at that time, there was no automatic payments. You had to go collect money.
Yeah.
So you had to go door to door and collect. And I was in a relatively poor neighborhood. And it was funny because not everyone wanted to pay for their papers. And my mother would sit outside, and I wasn't allowed to come home until I got all my money for that week. And it used to be the worst day of my life. I had no problem delivering papers. Collecting money was so difficult to do, and having people angry at you, trying to get out of it. And but it taught me a great lesson about the value of money and how important it is. And the paper route was great because you bought the papers and you charge a premium on it. So you actually had your own little business, right?
Oh, gotcha.
They would charge you, I think it was $1.50 a week at that time, and you were charged $2.25, so you get your 75 cents for each one. And that's where you learned, I guess, the start of business.
Yeah, it's that creating of, like you said, the value of money. I think that gets so lost for those who don't work. And we've seen it with some of our clients' kids that maybe haven't had a part-time job into university and just continue to be a student. You kind of miss that element of it where you get into the real world and not really having the past 5 years or 6 years of part-time experience, so you understand the value of money.
I listened to one person, and I forget who to give credit to for this, but they told me their theory, and they were a grandparent, and they said when they were buying it was Lego. They were buying Lego for their grandson, and Lego is very expensive, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you realize that if you're ever going to buy Lego, it's extraordinarily expensive. You can spend $100 on Lego pretty quickly. But when their grandson wanted Lego, what he did is he gave him the cash and made the grandson go to the counter with the cash to buy the Lego. So he brought him to the store, but I said, here's a $100 bill. And it was very different for the grandkid to go and part with that $100 bill and seeing that Lego isn't just a box. It's actually $100 in your hand you're not going to have in your hand anymore after you get this Lego. So I thought that was a neat idea.
Yeah, and it really is, teaching those values to the kids. I mean, it's one of those things where growing up, actually having to physically part with something and not just have something magically appear in your lap. Yeah. I think it goes a long way for a lot of kids nowadays to truly get a grasp on it.
Yeah, it's just even simple things like pay stubs.
Yeah.
When your child comes home with their first pay stub, let's talk taxes. Why is my pay stub? I remember getting that speech with my kids.
Yeah.
I make this much an hour, and they did simple math and said, why am I not being paid that?
Where's the rest? Yeah.
Well, there's a few things you have to go.
CRA.
Let me introduce you to CRA, unions, and everything else is going to take money from you. There's a saying that goes, inheritance isn't a degree, it's experience. So that inherited money is not going to make you any better with money. It doesn't really have that effect. You actually have to learn how to use it.
Yeah, and it's a good thing for kids to start understanding, with the part-time jobs and understanding, pay stubs. Then they'll start to understand, not to rely on the parents' finances for their own finances. And we do financial plans all the time. Hardly ever are we ever going to put in an inheritance into a financial plan because you just never know, right?
Things happen, and there is no law that says you have to leave your money to your kids.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, in this business, I've seen many times where money doesn't go to the kids. I've seen times where the care that's needed to take care of the parents goes way beyond where we thought it would go, and there's not much money left over afterwards. Knew this one person that came from a very wealthy to-do family, and when their parents died, they realized they donated a lot to charity, a lot more than they thought. And they were very impressed with their parents because their parents were very philanthropic. I always have trouble saying philanthropical. But they didn't realize that they were going to give away as much money as they did. And they were still fine. It was still very good. And they were very proud of how good their parents were. But sometimes these things can surprise you.
Yeah. I have a client now who's living well into her 100. She's about 104 now. And for those kids to expect an inheritance, pretty much impossible now because she's been in a retirement facility for 10, 15, almost 20 years.
It can get pricey.
They can, absolutely.
So let's talk about once you give money to kids, how to go and get the money to the kids. Should kids get money all at once? What's your thoughts on things?
I lean towards no. There's a lot of great ways you can set up a trust account now, even while living in trust, that you could be able to choose the disbursement in terms of when you feel that they're ready for it. A lot of our clients now, that we've kind of coached them in the way of, maybe at the age of 21, they get X amount of dollars. At 25, they get X amount of dollars. Or maybe if they get married or have a child, then they can get the remainder of it. But like you said, I mean, there's a certain age where you still need to have them develop those habits.
Yeah.
And until those habits are developed, it's to your discretion. But I think the habits need to come first before the inheritance.
Yeah. Essentially, what you find is, when children are under 18, it's mandatory, right?
Yeah.
You can't manage your money if you're under 18. But then you get into that tricky age, and if you fill out a will and you don't do anything, everything reverts back to 18.
Yeah.
Right? So if people ignore these rules, at 18, the kids get the money. And at 18, I wasn't a terrible kid, but you wouldn't want to give me a bunch of money.
Yeah, I don't want to know what I would do with it.
I'd have a really nice car, I tell you that.
Yeah.
So you get into that. You have other things that are family trusts that are set up. And family trusts are a long-term situation where you want your net worth to fall through to the whole family.
Yeah.
And family trusts are very different because all the families put together in one. So if the family gets along very well, they have a company business or something like that, net worth can fall through to a family trust to keep the family going over years. There's non-discretionary trusts, which are very detailed on when people get everything. At this age, between 18 and 25, you're going to get this. 25, you're going to get this. 27, you're going to get this. They give all the ages that you can do. You don't want to really control things from the grave, but sometimes it's more necessary.
Yeah.
When you're setting up your wills, we always say you should put the trust arrangements in because you don't know what your 5-year-old, we all think your 5-year-old is going to be perfect. And unfortunately, not all 5-year-olds turn out to be perfect 22-year-olds, right? So you need this trust in there to protect them against themselves because giving that much money to someone, if they had some type of issue, let's say even, I'll go to the bad side here, if they had a drug problem or anything like that, you can do a lot of damage by having that fall through. So you need that protective measures put in there. As time goes away, you can see how your kids are too. When you start to get a 22-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, you can see how their ability is to handle money. A lot of people I have a trust and their kid's 25 and they're a CA, they're an accountant. We say, why are we bothering with this anymore? They're
ready.
They're ready. They can take it. So you go from a non-discretionary trust where it has set rules to discretionary trusts. And this is when you take someone and you put them in charge of the kid's money. And you have to really trust the person and know that they're in the child's best interest. But that gives them the ability to follow the rules if they need to, but it gives them discretion to go and give them money if they thought the child was able to handle it. So all of a sudden, if they have, let's say, $2 million trust they're running, and the child, as we said, is an accountant or engineer and doing very well, and they want to buy a house at 27 years old, they have the discretion to let them use that money. So it adds a bit more freedom to that in there. And when you set up a trust, I always tell people to remember there's a 21-year rule on a trust, which means that all the gains in the trust have to be realized after a 21-year period from a taxation point of view. And people forget about that because people tend to put hard assets in trusts, like cottages and things like that, and that presents problems because there may not be liquid assets to be able to take care of paying, let's say, the tax bill on those things.
Yeah. There's, many different ways that the transition of wealth from one generation to the next generation can happen. But the most important thing that at least we've seen is, the kids have to be ready. They have to develop those habits. They have to understand money. And that's a big reason why within our office, we try to do our best efforts to encourage kids of our clients or to come into the office to understand, how investing works and really get that understanding of it first. Because you really do need to understand the habits before the inheritance tends to follow.
So I guess when we summarize everything together, number one, you have to teach your kids.
Yeah.
So you have to go and educate them in money, how that works, and get them to understand working, the value of money along the way. And then as you go and start to set up your place, the kids can understand your situation. It depends on the parents. If you want to let them know what they're going to inherit or you don't, it's a personal thing. Different cultures, different people handle that very differently.
Yeah.
But have them understand what's involved, and then to have arrangements set up in your estate documents to make sure that it has the right type of arrangement to go to the right type of trust to take care of them for both your good of the money and for their own good.
Of course.
And essentially, what we always tell people is, along the way, when you meet with us, we can give you some advice, but again, you need the lawyers and estate planners. And a lot of times, don't make the mistake of just having your real estate lawyer write up your will. they can do it and it's legal, but you're better off having someone who knows estates, knows how to set up these trusts, knows the ins and outs and the problems with them. You know, the worst thing you can do is not put the right amount of money into a proper estate plan, because it can cost lots of money in taxes and problems later on.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you enjoyed our podcast for today. I'm John Iaconetti. This is Mike Connon, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.